prioritizing sleep, getting to bed at least before 10, not eating too close, having a cool room. At least try all of these things to set yourself up for better success. Because if you wake up, if you have a great night's sleep, everything that you want to do in terms of health the next day is going to be easier.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Matters podcast, your home for nutrition, health, and wellness education. My name is Laurentine. I am a filmmaker and a nutritionist and the founder of foodmatters.com, and I'm here to hold your hand on this journey to optimum health, transformation, and emotional healing. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another Food Matters podcast. I'm so excited to have Kayla Barnes-Lentz in the studio with us today. And I will just give you a little background on Kayla, and then we can go into why we've asked her to join us today. So Kayla Barnes-Lentz is a leading expert in biohacking, brain health, and longevity. And she's the founder of LYV, the Wellness Space, offering cutting-edge therapies and the host of the Longevity Optimized podcast. She's very passionate about studying optimization of health, and she's been able to reverse her biological age by 11 years, inspiring others to achieve their best health and longevity. I love that. What a beautiful way to represent yourself and the way that you look as well, and the way that you come across. And these are all, I guess, reasons why we wanted to have you in the studio here today. So before we start with some great tips on life and biohacking and longevity, could you tell our listeners a little bit how you started in this field and on these topics?
Sure. It's definitely been a slow build. I now own a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, a hard shell at home, and have all these great devices. And I'm so deep in the science and my biomarkers. But it didn't start like that. I started just with studying nutrition. And as I began to learn more, I didn't grow up on a very healthy diet. I get this question a lot if my parents were really healthy, and they weren't. I grew up on a very standard American diet, processed foods. I had Pop-Tarts for breakfast, normal things here in the US. And when I just started to change and implement some of the things I was learning in school, I felt so much better. And I've been an entrepreneur since I've been about 17, 18 years old, somewhere around there. I officially started my first LLC. And I knew that I was going to have to optimize my biology in order to get more work done, be more focused, be more productive. So truthfully, the initial interest in human optimization came from a combination of both school, but also a desire to have a really high output and very high performance. So
Amazing.
later, I found a doctor by the name of Dr. Daniel Lehman, and I did his brain health practitioner certification. And I learned so much about brain health, what to eat, what not to eat, how people damage the brain, how brain injuries, even if it's small and you didn't really notice it at first, how that may impact cognition, but also mood. I learned subsets of ADHD and ADD, all different disorders of the brain. So when I finished that program, I really started to change my thinking from how does just the body look? Is that the measurement of true health? Or should we be looking at brain health as well? I think oftentimes we think about brain health much later in life, right? When we begin to lose our memory or forget our keys or something. But it really was a pivotal moment for me going through that type of coursework. And since then, I've done so many other things, just personal interests from integrative nutrition school and integrative health practitioner institute, all of these things, because I love learning. I read studies every day and have the podcast where I get to learn from so many incredible individuals. But it was a slow build. So as I saw that a lot of these things that I was doing were working, for example, I learned about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, I don't know, probably 7-8 years ago. And I sought out a chamber. I learned it from Dr. Amen. It's one of his first interventions, typically after a SPECT scan, to improve blood flow in the brain. So I started to seek out some of these, what are now called biohacking therapies, red light therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, trying cold, doing saunas, things of that nature, IV therapies. I've done exosomes, stem cells, all sorts of things that we can get into. But I started to just slowly learn the efficacy of some of these different therapies for me personally. And then about 5 years ago, when we started to really dive deep into opening Live, getting ready to open up the longevity clinic, I was on calls with all sorts of different manufacturers of devices, like medical devices, pharmacists, doctors, and other clinicians, to learn about the protocols that they were finding were helping their patients. So when we opened Live, I got to get all these incredible biomarkers. I wanted to do all the tests because we had to determine what we were going to offer. And I was just really amazed by the depth in which you can go and you can understand your biology, and then the different steps you can take to optimize it. So yeah, it's been a journey for me, but right now feels like really the time that longevity is getting the spotlight that I of course think it should have received a little earlier, but I'm excited about where we're at and the conversations being had. And throughout this whole journey, I've really learned that what works for men might not always be exactly what works for women, right? So I could keep going on, but yeah, that's how I got started.
That's beautiful. Wow. And what an incredible field to be studying in. And a lot of us, I guess, when we start out with learning about our health and we start seeing some results, we want to do more and we want to understand more about our body and our biochemistry. For those that are starting out in biohacking, what would you say would be the best area to focus on to start seeing these results that you are?
I get the question all the time, what supplements are you taking? What IVs are you doing? What peptides are you on? But the truth of the matter is that you have to master the basics, or you should master the basics prior to jumping into a ton of supplementation and these more expensive therapies, right? Because we need to have a solid foundation. So, what do we do every day? We sleep, we eat, we move, we breathe, we drink, and we have social connections. So if you can start to optimize, and I would love to walk through maybe how to optimize all of those areas, that is going to really significantly move the needle on your health. So if we want to start with what we eat, for example, we just can get rid of completely those ultra processed foods. And it's interesting because in polls, a lot of people actually don't know what an ultra processed food is. So there's processed foods which may just combine a few ingredients. For example, like a processed food that I consume would be something maybe like a sauerkraut that has a little bit of processing of combining ingredients, but we want to really avoid these ultra processed foods with unnatural ingredients. A lot of these fillers and preservatives, we want to completely eliminate those. So I always focus on doing just single ingredient foods, right? So we've all heard it, shop around the perimeter of the store. That's going to be single ingredients, an avocado, one ingredient, kale, one ingredient.
And that helps because you don't have to read the labels, right?
Exactly. It shouldn't, ideally, it doesn't even have a label. Like I said, the only thing that I even consume at this point that's, let's call it processed, is something just like a organic grass-fed beef bone broth or something of that nature. There's a little bit of processing that goes on, but we really want to focus on 7% of my diet is just single ingredient foods. That's carrots, that's dark leafy greens, that's blueberries, that can be wild caught fish, it can be grass-fed meats in moderation. So primarily we know that the Mediterranean diet is the most backed by science for longevity. So that has nuts and seeds and berries and avocados and a lot of fish, a lot of extra virgin olive oil. EVOO can be highly caloric, so you want to build that in with your goals. But first step is definitely what you're eating. And I would say the next step is sleep, right? So I would actually put sleep before even the food, because we know that even one night of poor sleep can increase blood sugar levels. It can increase the hunger hormone, ghrelin, so you feel more hungry, you have more cravings. It can have this entire cascade of negative side effects on our biology. And this is only one night of poor sleep, right?
So I know, but that's so stressful, right? Because there's so many people that are listening right now. They're like, well, we're getting pretty much 80% of my night's sleep are not really healthy sleeps. So yeah, it is. It's not as easy as like, oh, just sleep better. Sometimes I find it really hard when people say, well, just get healthy sleep, 8 hours. And it's like, after 4 hours, you're awake and you're like, boom, and you can't fall back asleep.
So when it comes to, I think I have a few maybe points here. Number one is sleep environment and building your schedule actually around your sleep, which is what I do. So instead of having sleep as like a secondary thought, like, oh, I'll go to bed when I'm done with everything I'm doing, when I wake up, I immediately start my day to improve my sleep. So I get morning sunlight into the eyes, which alerts your brain and body to wake up. And it's going to anchor your circadian rhythm. So we have these ancient circadian rhythms that when our ancestors, they would wake with the sun and then would fall asleep as the sun was setting, essentially, or as soon as it got dark. We've now been completely disconnected from these natural circadian rhythms because we're being bombarded by blue light, because we are eating too late, because when we eat too late, that sends signals to our body that it's not time to sleep. So melatonin production is reduced. So I would definitely say first try to really set yourself up for success by one, prioritizing sleep. So I'm in bed every day by 8:30. So therefore, all my friends know that if they want to do a dinner with me, it's probably going to be at my house. It's going to be at 5 o'clock. I build my life around that instead of allowing sleep to be an afterthought. So that's one big tip, is really build your life around it. Second thing I alluded to was not eating too late. So I eat at minimum, I have 3 hours prior to my last meal and then going to bed, because if your body has to digest a heavy meal, you're not going to get into those deeper stages of sleep, which is incredibly important. I wear an Aura ring, and you want to aim for, if you're wearing some type of sleep tracker, you want to aim for at least an hour and a half of deep and REM sleep, because the quality also matters. A few other things like working out, which we'll talk about exercise more, but that helps to tire the body. So you do get more higher quality sleep. A super dark room. A lot of people, they are watching television or scrolling on their phone. They're getting blasted with blue light. And then they have all sorts of blue lights like within their room on the alarm clock, and the phone is right there. So having a pitch black room, or as dark as you can get it, is super helpful, because we now know that even the light hitting your skin can also disrupt the circadian rhythm. You can wear a sleep mask. I love a weighted sleep mask. It really helps to improve my sleep, especially when I travel and I'm outside of my natural environment. Having red lights on, you can just get a couple like cheap red light bulbs and put them in lamps and switch those on at night, so that you're not getting that blue light or those fluorescent LED lights all up until you go to bed. You can also do red light, blue light blockers. So there's the yellow version for the day and the red version for the night. That's a great one. Some people enjoy a sleep stack. I take it rarely, but sometimes I'll do like a glycine with an apigenin with a little bit of GABA and a little bit of L-theanine. And that is really great for relaxing the body. Of course, if you're introducing new supplements, you want to speak with your healthcare provider. And then the other thing is like not watching anxiety inducing shows, or like looking on your phone and on social media, things that are making you anxious. In the evening, our rule is at our house, between my husband and I, is we watch the sunset. So that further anchors the circadian rhythm. If you can see not only sunrise, but sunset. And then once sunset has happened, there's no more food, because we're not meant to be eating after the sun is set. And red lights go on. You can also even do a red light blocker on your television. I didn't watch TV, but my husband started watching TV. Now we're married, so there's a red light filter that you can put over like an Apple TV. So TV is even red if it's on. And then getting your heart rate down as much as you can prior to sleep is really helpful. So you could do food, prayer, breath work, anything that relaxes you, but that by far will make a huge impact on your sleep. Anytime that, like last night, I did sauna too close to bed. You can do sauna for sleep, which is great, but you want to do it 1 to 2 hours prior to bed. I did it right before bed. That increased my heart rate, and then my sleep score on Aura this morning was lower than normal, because it took more time for my heart rate to decrease. So that's another. I only like to use bedrooms for two things. I think you will condition yourself, if you do work in your bedroom or in your bed, to not think of your bedroom as a place for just sleep. So only, I guess we'll just say sex with my husband and sleep are the only two things that go on in that room. Super important to have an area designated just for sleep, so that you start to train your body to.
Yeah. In other words, not bringing your laptop into your bed and not bringing your iPhone in your bed. I mean, that's probably one of my biggest things as well. When I stopped taking all these devices into my room, because I was like, yeah, if you actually train your body to realize this is your bedroom, this is not really a room where you should be doing either work or sustain long hours and scrolling on your phone. So then, you would leave those devices behind before you step into that room of tranquility and the sanctuary, really.
Totally. And leaving your phone either way on the other side of the room or at least switching off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is also great because I always say we want our like bedrooms to be the most restorative place. So as much as you can, you want to maybe you can get them on Amazon. It's just a Wi-Fi switch and it'll turn all the Wi-Fi's off at night. And so you can have the lowest EMF room as well. My husband and I sleep in something called a Faraday cage, but that's like very extra. So it actually blocks out all the EMFs. It's like a cage around the bed and it's very helpful, but you don't have
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I live in Sydney as well, and we have one of those things because you can turn off your Wi-Fi at night, you can turn off all your devices at night, but it's still the 5G towers are still pulsing into the house. And so it's really important to have these type of devices to protect us while we're sleeping and our children.
Yeah. And a couple other quick things like keeping your room cool. I find significantly better sleep when the room is about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And we also have a few other things like an organic mattress, so there's not VOCs being off gas. But it's really just starting slow, prioritizing sleep, getting to bed at least before 10, not eating too close, having a cool room. At least try all of these things to set yourself up for better success. Because if you wake up, if you have a great night's sleep, everything that you want to do in terms of health the next day is going to be easier. It's going to be easier to go to the gym. It's going to be easier to eat healthy because you're not going to be having natural cravings. You're going to have more energy to go to the gym and you'll wake up earlier so you can get, I always like to say, set your mind before the day sets it for you. So whether that's journaling or prayer or gratitude, if you can not jump on your phone and get triggered by a social media post, but you can determine how you want to move through the day, you'll have a much more, successful day.
We spoke about the big six. So you were successful, beautifully talked about sleep. I love that. And nutrition. Is there other ones that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I mean, movement, that's definitely a pillar. And these are things that so far are pretty low cost. The food is probably the most expensive so far. But in terms of movement, I mean, we have different buckets of movement, right? And we know that if there was like one pill for longevity, it would be exercise. It is great for the brain, it is great for the heart. You have adding muscle mass, which is so incredibly important for women. We know, especially around menopause, that the bone density, we can develop sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle and bone. So we really need to be focused on building bone and building muscle as women. So I think of it as low level movement, which would be long walks. I try to build movement into my day. So if we weren't doing a video podcast and this was just a phone meeting, I would be either walking on a treadmill or outside walking. But I get for what I'm doing in my protocol. So as all my labs are public and what I'm doing is public. So I'm doing about 300 minutes per week of low level movement. Most of that is in the form of long walks in my neighborhood. I live in like the Hollywood Hills area. So lots of like up and down. So it's a little zone 2 as well. I also am doing at least 3 days a week of strength training. And I prioritize compound lifts because we talked about strengthening the bones. So we really do want to be able to load the bone. And if you have never done compound lifts, I would recommend really researching it or maybe working with a trainer because you don't want to get hurt. You don't want to go too heavy. They can be difficult. So compound lifts, though, for women, I think are really great because they build the muscle, but they're also applying weight to the bone to really strengthen our bones. So at least strength training 3 times a week. And then a metric of longevity is a VO2 max. So I love to train VO2 max 1 to 2 times per week. And what's amazing is I wasn't training VO2 max even 2 months ago. This is pretty new. I added it to my protocol, but I've seen on my Aura Ring, they have a cardiovascular age. And of course, it's not a perfect metric, but my cardiovascular age has went from about -9 years down to 11 and a half years negative in the last like month and a half of doing deliberate VO2 max training. And
Okay, and so what exactly does that entail, just for those that have never heard of that?
Yeah, so essentially you want to be pushing yourself to the max for a short period of time. So traditional VO2 max training would be like a 4x4. So that would be all out sprint as much as you can for 4 minutes, and then a 4 minute of recovery 4 times. But I actually had a great interview with Dr. Stacy Sims, who is an incredible researcher and PhD in exercise, and she focuses on women. And she's actually changed my protocol because she says women do a little better with 6 minutes of rest. So it'd be 4 minutes all out, as hard as you can go, and then 6 minutes of rest, doing that 4 times. So it's a very uncomfortable workout, but it's so beneficial because not only is it great just for heart health in general and improving VO2 max, but also you can actually essentially strengthen and add mitochondria through mitochondrial biogenesis. And you can actually clear out some of the damaged mitochondria with doing this very high intensity exercise. So,
Wow. And it's also really great for regulating the hormones, right?
yeah,
Especially in women.
I mean, exercise is great for regulating hormones. This is a pretty intense workout, which will increase cortisol, but in a healthy person should come back down relatively quickly. But that's why I would start with 1 day a week of doing VO2. I'm doing
Mhm.
2 days of VO2 max training right now, but you want to work up to that to not overly stress your body, right? But exercise in general is great for balancing hormones. Sleep is absolutely essential for balancing hormones. I just can't stress the benefits of sleep enough. But then we also have, just to finish out and round out the movement, we have mobility and stretching, right? I think those two things are forgotten sometimes. So mobility work, you can look up some videos on YouTube or work with a trainer, but I do some light mobility work several times a week. And then we also want to stay flexible. When we're training, I'm not just training for the idea of how I look right now. That's a great benefit, right? I like to maintain a very fit body. But I'm thinking about when I'm 85, 90 years old and want to be picking up my grandchildren, or I want to be putting a suitcase in an overhead bin. It's like we're training for life. So it's so important.
Absolutely. Yes.
Not,
I love that.
yeah, not only be strong, not only be able to be fast. Gait speed is another marker of like a more traditional marker of longevity. We have VO2 max, we have grip strength, and we have gait speed. These are very traditional markers of longevity. So you want to have a faster gait. When your gait starts slowing down, things are going in a negative direction. I have like in the top 99th percentile of grip strength, and I don't train grip strength. Like you could train grip strength theoretically, and you can get at home. I do these individual metrics. So I do a spirometer, which is measurement of lung health. I do a blood pressure cuff, and then I do grip strength every week to see where I'm at. And I'm about 98 pounds of grip strength, and that's very high for a woman. But grip strength is a proxy to your overall strength and muscle mass. So you
Amazing. Okay.
a higher grip strength. But like I said, if you're just training for grip strength with like one of the squeezers, that's not gonna benefit you in the long term. The number might move up on the scale, but it's a proxy for overall strength in the body. That's
Mm.
really important. So that's movement. And then touching on a few things in our environment. So actually what we do most every single day is breathe. We're constantly breathing. And there's
Mm.
really upgrade your breath. One is through high quality air filtration. There's a few ways to do it. I mean, plants are a great way to filter the air. Usually the air is more toxic inside. I'm actually living in LA and we're going through the fires right now. So I think the air is more toxic outside right now. But in general, indoor air is normally more toxic than outdoor air. So I would recommend looking into a really high quality air purifier for your home because you spend so much time there. And then focusing on your breathing, right? Like stress for women report significantly higher levels of stress than men. And so by slowing down our breathing, we can activate that parasympathetic nervous system. And a lot of times women, although we live 4 to 6 years longer than men on average, we also suffer with a lot more chronic disease. I mean, autoimmune,
Mm.
percent of autoimmune conditions are women. So I believe a lot of that has to do with how we kind of harbor stress and the levels of stress that women experiencing, but that we also perceive because we seem to, I guess, just experience stress differently than men. So really focusing on activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest, digest, relax state, and reducing the amount of time that we spend in sympathetic, which is that fight or flight and overdrive. Because today's world, we have constant access to us. We're constantly scrolling on social media. We're just bombarded with these stressors that are not natural. So by slowing
Yeah.
down your breath intentionally throughout the day, I start with this in the morning doing some breath work. I do it midday. I do it evening. So our breath is also
I really love that you say that because I'm such a big believer in that as well. And sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't have time to do a yoga class or go to a breathwork class." And it's true. Like if we don't carve that time out, but it can actually be done throughout the day. Like you're saying, you give yourself some cues on perhaps you can do this when you step into the shower. You can start
Mhm.
slow, long, deep exhalations, and even just the extending the exhalation is the powerful part, right? So yeah, I love that you're saying that.
I have this little device that's called a moonbird, and I keep it on my desk, so it's like literally always in front of me. But it inflates and then it deflates, and it slows your breath down. So I do this all the time. I use this while I'm on meetings. I mean, I could literally do it right now on the podcast, but it's a reminder to just really focus on my breath. And it's a,
Can you show me that device? That looks like an interesting device. I've never seen that before.
yeah. So you have,
So you hold it in your hand and you like breathe with it?
yep, exactly. So I don't know if you could see, but it's inflating, and that's when you breathe in, and then it's deflating really slowly, so it slows your breath down. It's like a breath trainer.
Wow.
So it's
See, even that, like that's just a little hack that allows us already to decrease our stress response because the stress response is really what it's all about. Like, because when you wake up in the morning, you're stressed out, you've got a massive to-do list that you hadn't done from the night before already. So you're already stressed out. And then, yeah, that can put your body into a state of fight and flight. And if you don't manage that, or if you don't know how to manage, that's why I love all these simple tools and these tips and tricks. Thank you.
absolutely. And it's just, yeah, it's so important for women to focus on stress. And for a long time in my biohacking protocol, I was just adding more stressors and more stressors because I was intermittent fasting for too long. I was then doing cold plunging at really cold temperatures too often. I've actually developed, I have a female longevity community. It's women only. And I have an entire monthly, week by week. So in your follicular phase, how to eat and how to train and what stressors to incorporate. In the follicular phase, we can fast longer, we can do more cold plunging, but when we get into the luteal phase, especially for women that are trying to conceive, you want that progesterone to increase. You want to be in a more parasympathetic state. You want to take it a little bit easier. So we can, I think everyone should work on mastering the basics, getting exercise, high quality sleep, high quality nutrition, and then you can work on these refinements like how can I optimize as a woman? But stress management is just really huge for us. There's another metric on Aura that I look at, and it's called HRV, or heart rate variability. That's the amount of time in between your heartbeats. And ideally, you want it to be higher. So I'm about 60 to 70 right now, but my goal for the end of the year is to be over 100. And in order to get there, I'm going to have to decrease stressors in my life. So maybe less meetings, maybe more breath work, maybe more restorative time. But HRV is another good metric to look at that you can look at home that can be really helpful to understand your overall stress load.
We spoke about your studies in brain health before and the Mediterranean diet. I would love to hear from you some of your healthy swaps in regards to good fats and how you're stimulating good, healthy brain activity.
Yeah, I mean, exercise, by the way, is great for brain activity, increases brain derived neurotrophic factor, which can actually help develop new neurons. So important. The blood flow to the brain is just great. When it comes to healthy fats, I only really have a few different fats that are in my diet. I know it's a massive debate online about the seed oil, canola oil debate. I'm against seed oils. I mean, if you've seen videos of how they're processed, how they're made with the hexane, it's higher in omega 6s, which we know are more inflammatory, whereas omega 3s are more anti inflammatory. So I love things like really high quality EVOO, and I use that for, you have to do the right temperatures, right? So I don't use extra virgin olive oil for high temperature cooking because it's made for more lower temperatures. I also do like a grass fed butter or from time to time a little bit of coconut oil, but it's primarily and avocado oils. But as of late, I've been a little bit concerned with the avocado oil market because after seeing some third party testing of avocado oils, there's some that are being cut with canola oil. So I'm wading through a lot of the data now to see which brands are going to be the safest. But I think in general, avocado oil for higher heat cooking. We have the butter that you can also do like grass fed butter. And then you can do the EVOO for salads and dressings and things of that nature that are colder. But these are all great. The brain is mostly fat and water, right? And it's also amazing because the brain's only about 2 pounds, but it consumes about 30% of your calories in terms of energy. So it's an incredibly energy consumptive organ. So when I'm eating food, I'm thinking, do I want my brain to be running on Doritos or do I want it to be running on wild fish and blueberries? I mean,
What a great filter to be shopping in the supermarket with
yeah, I mean,
next time you're tracking those aisles, right? That's such a great question.
yeah, and I want to have incredibly high cognitive performance. So, of course, and I want my mood to be good. So, it's like you can't consume junk and intend to feel incredible, right? If you eat junk, you're going to feel like junk. It really is that simple. And our
It's the
mothers,
same as a car. What sort of petrol do you put in your car? I mean, you know that the car's not going to run well if you put terrible petrol in.
absolutely. And actually, the car analogy is great, and I have one too. It's like if you were given one car when you were born, it was the only car that you were going to have for the rest of your life, how would you take care of it?
How would you treat it?
You would be maintaining it all the time. You would be checking the air filters. You'd be giving it premium gas. You'd be washing it. You'd be doing all the things. So we only get one body. But it's odd because so many individuals don't see it as this incredible gift that we've been blessed with,
Mm,
and they don't treat it the way it should be treated. And these are things that human beings evolved on. We evolved on movement and good quality food and friendships, circles of friends, communities. We now know that
community,
loneliness.
right? I love the studies with the blue zones. And I mean, Mediterranean diet has also a lot to do with it. But when you go and have a look at these communities and how they live, friendships, close knit family circles, and living close together with grandparents and younger kids, all those things, we've sort of lost that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same. I mean, people might feel like they have a lot more connections now because of social media and followers or friends online, but enjoying downtime and feeling so loved and you loving others in person is so incredibly beneficial for the body because it decreases the stress response, right? Puts you into that
Mm,
parasympathetic state of healing and feeling secure. So that's another, we haven't gotten there yet on the list, but that's another thing that is those core longevity principles that are either free or low cost. Because I don't like, yes, my husband and I, we're spending over six figures a year on all this data and tracking and hyperbaric chambers. That's me trying to push the limits, hopefully for women to see what's possible and how good we can feel. But that is not required for great health. I don't want people to think that biohacking is only this like incredibly unattainable lifestyle and you have to do all the things that I do or that someone else does because these pillars that we're talking about will move the needle far more than one NADIV. I mean, yes, NADIVs can be a great part of a protocol or NAD supplementation, but these mastering the basics is going to take you 99% of the way there or 95% of the way there.
in regards to, should we go back into kitchen? So
Yeah.
people love to know kitchen swaps, healthy alternatives. What would you say are the biggest dangers that we bring into our kitchens, and how can we have healthier alternatives for those?
Yeah, I mean, some things that come to mind outside of right the food, right? You want to have again the single ingredients, and then we talked about the oils. I think pans, pots and pans, for a long time, Teflon was so exciting to people because it could just the egg could slide right off the pan, right? It was completely nonstick. But we now know that those are loaded with chemicals called PFAS, and these are forever chemicals that we're finding in the body many years later. So I use 100% ceramic pans. I've interviewed a few toxicologists on this and experts in the industry. I've landed on a brand called Extrema, 100% pure ceramic, not just ceramic coating. I think that's really important. Reducing microplastics as much as possible. So we now know that
Yes.
5%, up to 5% of the brain is essentially plastic from this microplastic and nanoplastic accumulation. We now know that microplastics have been found in every organ from the heart to the testes to the ovaries to even the umbilical cord. So microplastics are a big issue that we need to consider because what they do in the body is they can create these xenoestrogens and almost mimic estrogen. So we're seeing young girls going into hitting puberty early, which can lead to earlier menopause. We're seeing a lot of issues, specifically in women too, with some of these environmental toxins, one of them being micro and nanoplastics. So anything plastic, like plastic containers or plastic cups or plastic water bottles in the kitchen, I would try to swap those out. My favorite is glass. Second favorite would be some sort of metal water bottle, would also be acceptable. But all of my containers are glass, even if the food comes in plastic, which I try my very best to like do local like farms and get non-plastic wrap foods, I at least take it out and put it into something glass right away. I think that's really important. Even on my blender, I have swapped from the traditional plastic Vitamix to a metal blender. They have a metal version from Vitamix, so that's helpful. Same thing with these.
I agree. I look at that a lot because I mean, we make soups and then we put it back in the blender and I'm like, that's actually leaching plastic straight into the food. So I'm really glad that they're starting to make a lot more blenders that can be heat sensitive with metal.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I took one of the I think first microplastic tests in the market. I did a video on this actually on YouTube not too long ago. It shows a test that I do called the total toxic burden. So it looks at environmental toxins, plastics, and PFAS, all these heavy metals, molds, mycotoxins. Sorry, it doesn't. The total toxic burden doesn't look at plastic, but I do the total toxic burden, and then I did the microplastic test separate. And I mean, I have microplastics, which I've lived for the last 10 years, really at least 5 years. 10 years the journey started, but avoiding everything plastic. I mean, I won't get a hot cup of Starbucks because A, the coffee is not organic, and then B, even the plastic lining. So if it looks like it's a metal soda container, and wow, you can tell I don't drink soda. I barely could even think of the words. Like there's plastic lining inside of those paper cups, and then you put a hot liquid into it, it releases the microplastics. So as much as possible, even clothing, I've really tried to move my clothing to more natural fibers and organic cotton because clothing can have a lot of microplastics, nanoplastics, and even harmful chemicals like cotton sprayed with glyphosate. We know that glyphosate is a known carcinogen, and then we have the workout clothes with these, non-organic cottons and polyesters that we're sweating, and then our body does steep things in transdermally. So I guess my next one would actually be water filtration in the kitchen. I think having a high quality water filter is really important. I'm not sure of the water quality in Australia, but here in the US, there's a website you can go to called the Environmental Working Group or the EWG.com, and you can look at their local tap water database. And here in the LA tap water database, it just shows the incredibly high amount of known toxic particles.
Wow.
Everything in medications, like things like birth control are being found. It's really wild. So I think a high quality water filter, at least a countertop one, if not a whole home water filtration system, is a really great upgrade as well. Those would probably be my top kitchen tips. And then utensils as well. So I try to use as many either wooden or steel. I really try to avoid those plastic black utensils. There's actually some interesting fact about them. Sometimes they are made from like recycled electronics. Those black ones that like spatulas and things, not always. So don't say that I'm saying always, but sometimes can be used from recycled electronics. And then you're getting all of those chemicals that were inside of the electronics. So really wild. So paying attention and looking for cleaner.
So even the silicone, I believe, is just a no. Like, I think it's best to just go back to wooden spoons, like using the wooden utensils that we used to have back in the days when our grandparents were cooking.
Yeah, I mean, definitely these are better options. But I think that's all that I have for kitchen swaps right now.
That's great. I love it. Let's just focus and hone in a little bit more on microplastics. So where do we find them? How do we actually detect them in our body? How do we know that we have them in our body? And how, like some of the statistics?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the brain being up to potentially 5% plastic at this point. The microplastics and nanoplastics seem to be accumulating faster in the brain based on what I'm seeing at this point. Obviously, we need a lot more research. This is very an emerging field and a newly awareness around microplastics. But in terms of places that we're getting it from, I mean, tap water is probably one of the biggest. So again, filtering your water. I like reverse osmosis filtration, and then you should remineralize it because it does clean out everything, but you want to put the minerals back into the water, so that's important. I also primarily drink spring water out of glass, but tap water is a big source of microplastics. Any of those prepackaged foods, like especially if you're putting it in the microwave, like gosh no. You take those plastic meals in plastic and then put it into the microwave and it just will really leach. Even I've really thought a lot about tea because the microplastics in the tea bags, the tea leaves are fine, but that's something that I'm thinking about. It can be in our clothing, as I mentioned. Salt is another kind of big one because the salt is sea salt particularly, is sitting at the bottom of the ocean, and then there's all this microplastics in there, and it's actually attaching to the salt. So I found a microplastic free salt brand that I'm using. So those are some of the places that we're getting these microplastics. Of course, plastic water bottles. You think about those like soft plastic water bottles that people will like toss in their trunk and then they're being heated and it's just microplastics galore in there. So I travel everywhere with, I have a glass water bottle right now, but I travel everywhere with some sort of my own water container. So I'm not using those single use plastic bottles. That's really important. And I mean, in general, we have a lot more research to do, but I mean, I believe that microplastics are definitely part of the reason that we're seeing more increase in chronic disease. It's also, of course, our food and lack of movement. But how to test microplastics? So the only test that I'm aware of, I'll have to send it to you and link it in the show notes. There's a company that is doing just microplastic testing. I think actually Brian Johnson, who is very well-known male biohacker, he also released a microplastic test. So I think you can get them there. And the reality it probably is that everyone is going to have some level of microplastics because they're so pervasive. But I think it's all about doing what you can to reduce your exposure to plastics in all areas, and then also helping the body to detox, right? So where we're at is that we don't yet know how to get the microplastics, as far as I'm aware, out of tissues. So once it has left the bloodstream and become embedded in tissues, I don't know of a way to get the microplastics out. I think
Right. And even out of the brain.
right, but if the microplastics are in the bloodstream, the nanoplastics, things like something like a TPE or therapeutic plasma exchange, they're showing pretty good results. I just had this
Sorry, what did you say? What was that called?
therapeutic plasma exchange. So they actually removed, I just
Mm.
had this done a few days ago. They remove all the plasma from your body. So I think I had like 2.5 liters of plasma removed, and then they replace it with albumin, and then your plasma regenerates in like 24 to 48 hours. But it pulls out all those toxins that can be in your plasma circulating. But that's the best option that I really know of right now. Of course, you want to do other detox practices such as sauna, eating like cruciferous vegetables. A lot of fiber is helpful to just always keep your detox going on within your body, but we need more data on how efficacious something like sauna is for a microplastic, or probably more nanoplastics to actually be excreted potentially, but we need more data. I can't even say for sure that's going to be the best solution. I believe in sauna for so many other reasons, like the reduction in cardiovascular events and general detoxing. But we have a lot to learn still about microplastics. So the best advice that I can give someone right now is try to reduce your exposure as much as possible and really increase like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, sprouts, and sulforaphane for improving detox and maintaining adequate amounts of fiber in your diet.
Wow, you said it all so fast and so well. I love it. So succinct. Just going back to nutrition as we're coming back to the end of the interview, and we would just love to know from you as a personal, you've been doing this for years, out of your personal experience, what is your go-to breakfast that makes you feel energized for the rest of the day?
Oh, well, I have two breakfasts. I have one pre-gym, like I call it a protein coffee. So I'll have a little bit of biodynamic coffee, and then add creatine, 5 grams of creatine. Love creatine for women, great for the muscles, but also great for the brain. There's some studies to support it's good for mood as well. So love creatine. And then I also put a really high quality protein powder in there. So it seems to be for women, we do a little better with a little bit of fuel pre-exercise because it can also help to blunt that
Yes.
cortisol response. So I like getting in about 15 grams of protein. Then I also add collagen peptides in there. And I'll sometimes add some colostrum, which makes me feel really great for the gym. I have that, of course, after I have my at least 30 to 40 ounces of water with some minerals and electrolytes. And then after the gym, I love this meal. This is my normal breakfast. I have a couple of grass-fed pasture-raised eggs. I do some sort of sauerkraut. So sometimes I'll do carrot, sometimes I'll do beet, but it's really good to have those fermented foods. Have a little bit of lentils in there, which I absolutely love. And then I will also do some broccoli sprouts or some type of like cruciferous vegetable. And that is pretty much my breakfast. So yeah, we got a lot of protein in there. We have vegetables, and we have fiber, and we have a fermented food. And I just absolutely love that. And also sometimes most of the time I'll add some avocado or some olive oil. Either chop it with some olive oil or do some avocado, but then that's a great way to start the day. Like your brain is going to love that meal.
It sounds so delicious. And Kayla, I loved this interview so much, and I would love the listeners to let them know how they can get in touch with you or even come and visit you in your live clinic.
Yeah, so my Instagram is at Kayla Barnes, KaylaBarnes. And then I have my website, which has my podcast and my YouTube channel linked out. I have a lot of really good, I think I'm one of the only women creating long form content on YouTube. So I have my morning routine, my midday routine. That's KaylaBarnes.com, KaylaBarnes.com. I also have my female longevity community on there, which is so near and dear to my heart because I do an AMA. I really found on Instagram it wasn't a place that women could be really vulnerable with what they were going through. Like in my comments or my DMs, I couldn't get to all of them. So I started this community. It has like 40 different courses in there on all my philosophies, everything I'm doing with my protocol, science every single week that's mostly done on women, which I love. And it's a community of other like-minded women. And there's so many women that are just like, want to pursue health so actively, and I love it, and we all just like have fun in this group. So that's on my website. And Live is a great place. So our clinic is based in Ohio, which is my hometown, but if you're living in California, you can actually also, our medical providers are licensed in California, so we can also see you via telemedicine there, and we will be expanding this year, and that's lyv-wellness.com.
Amazing. I'm going to be sure to check that out when I'm in LA next.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Kayla. It was such an amazing interview, and thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So yes, thank you everyone for listening. I really enjoyed that talk. I hope you did too. And there will be more of these on the Food Matters podcast. So head to foodmatters.com and see you again.